Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Ice. Forest. Plains. Swamp. Underground. We're talking about geomancy, okay? We're talking about geomancy.
Howdy. My name is Nonat, and the Secrets of Magic book for Pathfinder 2e came out about a month ago with a ton of new stuff, and I've barely had time to talk about any of it. Luckily, this is a tabletop RPG, and new books don't come out all that often. But today we're going to talk about the Book of Unlimited Magic section of Secrets of Magic, and if you're not aware, this is a part of the book that comes with a bunch of different variant rules and optional class archetypes to augment existing classes and change some of the rules and setting to your specifications. Mainly today we're talking about Geomancy, a very interesting archetype that's available to pretty much any nature spellcaster. You actually don't even need to be a primal caster, you just need the ability to cast spells with either the air, cold, earth, fire, plant, or water trait. They don't even need to be from your spell list. If you get them from your ancestry, you can take the Geomancer dedication. You also need to be trained in nature. Before we go over the actual features of the Geomancer archetype, it's important to talk about exactly what Geomancy is. Put simply, Geomancy is earth magic. Now, this does not mean that all of its effects are going to be rock and stone, but rather the magic is drawn from the environment of the earth around you. As you can see, there are 9 distinct different environments, and that's just in the base rules for how the interactions work with this dedication. I will warn you, Geomancer is a fairly complicated archetype, and I would not recommend it for a first-time player. Stop! Commercial time. So Fireball does deal fire damage. Howdy. My name is Nonat. Oh, what am I wearing? Well, it's just the new
Nonat 1's merchandise.
That wasn't me. Anyway, it's the new Nonat.
Nonat 1's merchandise.
Okay, look. I'm just trying to tell them about the
new Nonat 1's merchandise, available exclusively at nonat1s.com.
What he said, whatever. I'm done. This ad is stupid.
Support the channel. Get yours today.
The dedication grants you terrain attunement. This means if you ever cast a spell that uses a spell slot, and that spell shares a trait with the environment you're in, such as using an earth trait on a mountain, you get to activate a bonus effect with that spell. If the spell happens to have multiple traits that can apply to multiple different terrain, you can only apply a single one. The example they give is being on a snowy mountain. If you're somehow casting a spell that has the cold and earth traits, you can only apply one of them, not both. These effects also don't have a specific listed duration. The advisement given by the book is that the GM will determine how long you gain these effects, but ideally they will last as long as they are prevalent to you. If you cast a water spell in the ocean, then the ocean will continue working with you, ideally for the rest of combat or for a decent amount of time outside of combat. Obviously not forever, but long enough. Should you use a water spell in an aquatic environment, you gain a swim speed equal to your land speed, which means you do not need to roll athletics to swim, and you can move incredibly quickly as the water magically moves you in whatever direction you choose. Additionally, if you use this on land in an aquatic environment, such as on a riverbank, you can use your swim speed in place of your land speed if it is higher. This is very rare that it would ever happen, but I'm sure there's a combo with like a short, heavy dwarf in massive armor who gets a swim speed from something else like a spell and can then replace that slowed down land speed with their swim speed. Very cool. Should you cast a cold spell in an Arctic environment, all of your opponents that you hit with that spell must make a fortitude save against that same spell's DC. If they fail, they take a -5 foot speed penalty for 2 rounds and -10 feet on a crit fail. Just a nice little bonus. The downside to that one is I feel like if you're fighting enemies in an Arctic environment, they're probably going to have a higher fortitude save because they're Arctically prepared to survive the cold, so that might be a bit more situational. If you cast a fire spell in the desert, the opponent must also make a fortitude saving throw against that spell's DC, and if they fail, they become fatigued until they can drink any kind of potable liquid. This is incredibly powerful in the middle of combat because fatigued gives you a -1 penalty to armor class and all 3 saving throws. This is incredibly powerful to do mid-combat because they're either going to have to deal with that permanent -1 or maybe fish around in a backpack, pull out a drink and swig it for like 3 actions. This is phenomenal so long as they fail that fortitude save. Also keep in mind, it affects every opponent you hit. This can turn your fireball into a mass debuff explosion that still deals 6d6. This is insane. If you cast a plant trait spell in the forest, any opponent hit by that spell must make a reflex save as vines and branches actually reach up and try to entangle them, and if they fail, they are clumsy 1, another way to inflict that -1 to armor class. If they crit fail, they're clumsy 2, which is massive. If you cast an earth spell while in a mountain environment, you gain resistance to all physical damage equal to the spell level. This is never going to be a crazy amount, but even if you're casting this at like level 3, casting a level 2 spell at level 3 to gain 2 damage resistance to all physical damage for a round is pretty solid. The only physical damage that gets past this resistance, as usual, is adamantine. If you cast a plant trait spell in the plains, you
Gain temporary hit points.
equal to the spell level. Pretty solid, pretty simple, pretty cool. If you cast an air spell in a sky environment, which I would rule that like the tippy top of a massive mountain would count as the sky, or obviously floating cities or what have you, you gain a 10-foot fly speed instantly effectively. You can fly 10 feet and then fall. This is probably the least impressive so far, but if you know you can take advantage of it and there's like a 10-foot gap, you can cast a quick just like throwaway magic missile and float across the gap. It's not too bad. If you cast a plant trait spell in the swamp, all affected enemies make a fortitude save, and on a fail, take persistent poison damage equal to half the spell's level. This isn't going to be too much, even at level 20, this is only 5, but at level 1, 2, that 1 extra poison damage every turn, if they can't get rid of it, that adds up. That can give you an extra 3 or 4 damage, and at low levels is pretty decent. This one falls off the later into the game you get, but for those low-level adventures, Swamp can be incredibly useful. And finally, Underground. If you cast an Earth trait spell, not only do you gain Dark Vision, but you also gain Tremor Sense up to 15 feet. This just lets you be very aware of your surroundings, and it makes it more difficult for things to hide from you. If you know there's something close by that you can't see, maybe casting a single spell to gain that Tremor Sense can be really helpful. A lot of things like to hide underground. And that is just the dedication. So let's go ahead and talk about some more feats like Attunement Shift. Attunement Shift takes the Geomancer from an okay archetype to a really good archetype. Once per 10 minutes, as a free action, if you cast a spell that has one of the appropriate traits like we talked about, you can change your terrain attunement to the terrain that matches the trait of the spell you cast. What does that mean? Well, let's say you are in an Arctic environment and you cast, Scorching Ray. You can then, as a free action, shift your attunement to Desert for 1 minute. This means for the next minute, you can take advantage of the desert terrain. You can no longer take advantage of that Arctic terrain, but this means no matter what environment you're in, you can start throwing out those fatiguing fireballs we talked about earlier. You switch your terrain attunement to desert, and suddenly all of your fire spells are now inflicting fatigue. Easily the strongest choice. I'm sure there's going to be some really creative and cool combos out there of mixing spells with the Geomancer dedication effects to make them insane. Attunement Shift is nuts. Shared Attunement is a little better if you're playing more of a support Geomancer. Basically, whenever you personally benefit from one of the Geomancer dedication effects, you can also grant that benefit to an ally within 30 feet. If you're all drowning in the ocean and you cast a water spell to give yourself that swim speed, you can also give one ally that swim speed as well. Pretty useful. Rough terrain stance is okay. It's great on something like a champion if they can somehow manage to get the spells to make use of it, but overall it's gonna be a little bit tough to sell. This is a stance, so it costs an action to enter, and you need to have just gained a terrain attunement this past turn. Basically, so long as you're in this stance, every square within 5 feet of you is difficult terrain. It's not bad, it makes it tough for enemies to get away from you, but if you're a spellcaster, namely a wizard or a druid on the backline, this stance isn't going to do much for you. Attuned Stride is pretty good though. Whenever you attune to a terrain, you ignore all difficult terrain of that environment type. If you are in a room full of stalagmites underground and you attune to underground, you can completely ignore the difficult terrain from them sticking up all over the place and move through until the end of your next turn just fine. Doesn't take an action, nothing. Nice and easy. Draw from the land is fine, but it does have anti-synergy with Attunement Shift at level 4. For one action, if you just gained a terrain attunement from the terrain you're in, you gain temporary hit points for 1 round equal to your level. This is good. If you use an earth spell on a mountain, you can gain, if you're level 10, you're gaining 10 temporary hit points for 1 round. You really can't complain. The problem is most Geomancers are going to want to change their attunement with Attunement Shift to make the most of their spells, such as the Fatiguing Fireball, which is still insane and I can't get over it. But this means if you shift your attunement to Desert while you're in the Arctic, you are technically not attuning to the terrain you're in, so you cannot use Draw from the Land. It's unfortunate, but to be fair, Draw from the Land is very powerful. There is no cooldown, there is nothing that says you can't keep doing this so long as you can keep attuning to the terrain, so it is constant temporary hit points. At level 12, you can gain the Read the Land feat, which grants you Commune with Nature as a 1-hour ritual instead of the normal 1-day cast time. And you can do it by yourself, you don't even need a secondary caster. This lets you ask the land questions. Now, the land will likely only know answers to questions about the land itself, but it's still very useful. It's good to ask. You can literally ask the rocks and the trees, has this kind of thing come by here? We're looking for this animal. Have you seen it? Does this thing live here? And that can be incredibly useful to just take a quick 1-hour wait, everyone can refocus, and you can just ask the land questions whenever you want. It's fantastic. Terrain Shield is fantastic. Once every 10 minutes, if you gained a terrain attunement at the start of your most recent turn from the terrain you're in, so once again, Attunement Shift will not work here, as long as you are attuned to your specific current terrain, and someone hits you with a strike, you gain resistance equal to double your level against this strike. This is a level 14 feat, so you are gaining 28 resistance against a single attack every 10 minutes. Now sure, you only get this once per encounter, but imagine just being able to say, 30 temporary hit points. And you're going to use them. Sometimes you give yourself temporary hit points and then you don't take a hit. This basically lets you say, oh, I'm taking a hit? I would like that resistance, please. That's amazing, it's fantastic. The only downside is that anti-synergy with Attunement Shift. I love this. Shifting Terrain, unfortunately, also has anti-synergy with Attunement Shift, which is a little unfortunate. I understand Attunement Shift is very powerful, and they need to give people reasons to use their current environment over using Desert every time, but it is unfortunate how many of these feats just don't work if you've shifted your attunement. Shifting Terrain is also a little bit harder to sell as well because it requires you to be in rough terrain stance, with the difficult terrain all around you. Basically, for a single action, any creature standing in your difficult terrain must make a reflex save or become clumsy for 1 round. The good news is it's clumsy 1 on a success, clumsy 2 on a failure, and Clumsy 2 plus Prone on a crit failure. Clumsy 2 plus Prone, meaning flat-footed, is a -4 to armor class for 1 action, 2 actions if you count getting into the stance. This is phenomenal. It's just unfortunate you need to take rough terrain stance in the first place, but it does make it a lot more enticing. You can even use this every 1d4 rounds. Now, if you roll a 4, unfortunately, you're probably not going to get to use it again that encounter, but if you roll a 1 or a 2, you might get another use out of this. Throw this on something like a monk that can really move and position themselves very easily and then throw everyone to the ground. You got something here. And the capstone feat, Quickened Attunement at level 16, is good, but unfortunately it's limited to once per day, which is fair. It's very powerful, and it is only at level 16 rather than some capstones being at level 18 or 20. Basically, as a free action, once per day, if you are about to cast a spell that matches the terrain you are in, reduce the number of actions taken to cast that spell. Now, you can't reduce them below 1, but this is basically going to turn most of your 2-action spells into 1 action so long as you're in the right terrain. Now again, once per day, basically this saves you 1 action once per day, but it does let you cast 2 spells. If you want, you can now cast 2 2-action spells in 1 turn, provided at least one of them matches your terrain. This can really give you a strong start to an important encounter if you're in the desert and you can just throw out 2 fireballs to start the encounter at level 16. That is nutty, and you're going to be doing well over 20d6 damage per target at that point, which is hilarious. And that's the Geomancer. The dedication is really the only super complicated part, and once you understand it, it's not too bad. For the most part, you're probably going to find 1 or 2 attunement types you prefer. I definitely like the fatigue effect from Desert, but there are rewards for using what is directly around you, so I like that sort of balance of do I use what I want to, or do I use what will give me a bigger bonus? There's a lot of fun things to have here. Geomancer's fun. I don't know if it's my type of character, but it would be fun to just play with the fatiguing fire mage. You could have a ton of fun adding debuffs to spells that usually only deal damage, really increasing their effectiveness. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like the Geomancer? Were you let down? I want to know what you guys think of this so far. I'm excited to get back to making content. It feels great to be back. It feels so good to be recording. I'm recording this the day of this video going up because it's the first time I've found the motivation and the time. So I hope you guys have been enjoying it as well. I want to give a massive shout out to my patrons who have been incredibly patient. I see you all. I really appreciate. I haven't put out a lot of Patreon content this month, but they're still supporting me to this day. If you would like to support me as well, there is a link in the description to the No Nat One's Patreon, where I usually release monthly homebrew and cool extra stuff to these people who go that extra mile. And don't forget to check out the No Nat One's merch store, link in the description at nonatones.com. Look at these cool shirts. All these cool designs done by Pataki Balaj, the artist. He's so talented, and I love that we've been working together, me, him, my producer, my girlfriend, all working together to create unique, iconic characters, releasing merchandise and information and stat blocks for them. It's a ton of fun. We've put a lot of love and a lot of work into this website, so be sure to go and check it out. That's it for me, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, No Nat One.